نحتمل لقد أنهكنا. إننا هنا ضحايا شهداء مع فرق التوقيت فقط. نحن نمضي واحدا تلو الآخر، ولا أحد ينظر إلينا ولا إلى حجم الكارثة والجريمة التي نعيشها في غزة. لا حماية، لا حماية دولية، لا حماية دولية على الإطلاق، ولا حصانة لأي شيء. لا تحمينا هذه الدروع ولا تحمينا هذه القبعات، إنها مجرد شعارات نرتديها فقط. هي لا تحمي أي صحفي على الإطلاق، على الإطلاق. لا تحمينا هذه الدروع ولا هذه ما نرتديها فقط، هي شعارات فقط. نحن هنا ضحايا على الهواء مباشرة، نفقد الأرواح واحدا تلو الآخر بلا أي ثمن. نمضي شهداء فقط مع فرق التوقيت. نحن ننتظر الدور واحدا تلو الآخر. زميلنا محمد أبو حطب كان هنا منذ نصف ساعة فقط وغادرنا الآن، هو وزوجته وابنه وأخيه وكثير من عائلته هم ضحايا هنا في داخل
blight on the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. I would not want to be a party to anything to embarrass the millions of black and white people in America who have struggled to make it possible that I can stand here today. I never rode on a bus in my life and took the abuse that some of you out there took. And I was flying on the plane here from California, and I was reading a book about Dr. King, and there were pictures in the book, and it brought back memories of that time for me, and it swelled my heart up with joy and pride to think of the courageousness of every person who participated in that time. You may not know how brave you were to do that, to sit there and take abuse and be spat upon, hit in the head with clubs, stone, ugly words thrown at you, and keep your dignity and remain nonviolent. I was one of those people who said that if anyone ever did that to me, I'd stab him in the eye. I'd hit him in the head with a brick. That's because I was frightened. I was too frightened to go down to Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. I was too scared to sit in the church at night and plan meetings. I was too frightened to be a part of that. But if it wasn't for you people who were down there and did that, believe me, I know in my heart that I wouldn't be here today.
Thank you. And while I'm happy for those we have helped over the past few years, taking about 75,000 homeless off the Los Angeles streets, I must say that the problem at hand runs much deeper than the poverty we see around us. When I created this program, focusing on just this one regional crisis, my long-term hope was that it would set a new precedent, that those who disproportionately benefit in this world would be inspired, step up, and help take responsibility for the plight of the less fortunate. After all, what I have done here is merely a patch that can only help a few. For the true source of poverty, our social system, continues to go unaddressed. We live in a world of stories and myths, and we've been told that the vast inequities that we see is the price we must pay for innovation and progress. Well, innovation to what end? And how do we define this notion of progress? For if progress is about how much one can own, the availability of jobs, the state of a nation's GDP, the rise of the stock market, or the development of some gadget to entertain and distract you, then we face a serious existential crisis. I submit that true progress can only be measured in the health, stability, integrity, and responsible freedom of a civilization, responsible to ourselves, responsible to each other, and responsible to the earthly habitat we all share. And by those measures, my friends, there is now little progress to be found, as we all sit idly by, presupposing that the way society works is the only way it ever could. That said, if it's true that we must persist in this inhumane economic order, an order that has proven it can only create affluence for a minority at the cost of destitution for the majority, then our only choice is to seek a new level of humanitarian effort. Today, 3 people have more wealth than the bottom 75% of the world's population. 6 billion people. The total wealth of the 4,000 billionaires out there have the means to end global poverty 100 times over. And yet, if you study their philanthropy, it is clear that they are far more concerned with their own interests, their own comforts, than working to counter this ongoing structural violence. You see, there's a deeper kind of poverty here. A spiritual poverty. A poverty that grows a culture of sociopaths, and the more they have, the more they want, and the less they seem to care otherwise. Moral bankruptcy, hiding behind this age-old story that one can have $1 billion in the bank while others starve, is somehow natural to the human condition. In a number of months, my program will end, as the funds will be gone. And to date, not one wealthy so-called philanthropist has offered to help keep the program running. Now I know this event is about peace, but it must be understood that the wealthy of this world, those at the root of true political power, are sick. Their priorities have nothing to do with true progress, and the time for tolerance is over. The billionaires of this world are not symbols of success. They are symbols of violence.
I think this is a foreshadowing of what could happen to the broader community if we don't do something about the storage of this fuel, over 180 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel, 100 feet above our drinking water aquifer. If we don't do something about eliminating that risk to the water resource. So I think it's time for action now. It is time. We cannot wait any longer. The water resources is precious. It's irreplaceable. It's pure. There is no substitute for pure water, and our lives depend upon it. So I would urge the decision makers and the Navy to take action immediately to take away this risk from our vital water resources there.
As people get swept from other places and other locations, she's sitting there, she living there in the bushes. You imagine this? She had her tent, she get everything that, make life comfortable for her, right? Somebody gets swept from someplace else, they come there. She look at them and she goes, you know what? You and your 3 kids need my house. That was her house. More than me. I don't want kids. Your 3 kids and you need them more than me. So everything is mine. That's yours. I'm gonna start from scratch over there, right? And so she did that again and again. And we start to realize that usually the day that people meet Twinkle is a day that they ran out of options. The shelter said they cannot stay. Their family said you cannot stay. The landlord said you never paid a rent, you cannot stay. Every place else is gone. That's usually the day they meet Twinkle. No. Imagine on the day you lost everything, this lady that you don't even know gave you everything she owned simply because you needed more than she did. And she done it again and again and again.
Imagine a scientist, tears welling up in their eyes, explaining the devastating effects of water contamination, or a social worker, voice trembling, recounting the daily battles faced by those in poverty. These moments of genuine emotion transcend mere statistics and facts. They cut through the noise and connect us deeply to the reality of these issues. I believe in the power of emotional education, using these raw, unfiltered experiences to help us empathize with others' struggles. By witnessing genuine emotional reactions, we can grasp the seriousness of crises like social injustice and human suffering in a way that numbers alone can't convey. But it's not just about feeling, it's about action. When we connect deeply with these stories, we're naturally inspired to do something, anything, to make a difference. This isn't about forcing action through guilt or obligation, but about fostering a genuine desire to help. I'm also fascinated by what makes certain emotional expressions universally impactful. What is it about a single tear, a quivering voice, or a heartfelt plea that moves us to act? By studying these mechanisms, we can create media that not only raises awareness but also mobilizes people to take real, meaningful action against issues like poverty and environmental crises. I believe that we all have natural empathetic tendencies. By tapping into these, we can inspire significant change without resorting to manipulation or force. It's about connecting emotional impact to real-world action, creating a society where empathy drives us to overcome injustice and suffering. These stories are more than just tales. They're catalysts for change. Let's listen. We are emotional beings. We feel deeply. Our emotions are an intrinsic part of who we are, shaping our experiences and interactions with the world around us. We laugh, we cry, we rage. These emotions are universal, transcending language and culture, connecting us in our shared humanity.
Yet somewhere along the way, we learned to fear these emotions. We were taught to suppress them, to hide them away, believing that vulnerability was a sign of weakness. We're taught to prioritize logic, to value stoicism. Society often rewards those who appear unflappable, who seem to have everything under control, leaving little room for emotional expression.
But what if our emotions held a different kind of power? What if, instead of being something to fear, they were something to embrace? What if they were the key to deeper understanding and connection? Emotions can bridge gaps, foster empathy, and create bonds that logic alone cannot.
Imagine a scientist, usually so composed, so focused on data and facts, tears welling in their eyes as they describe the devastating impact of contaminated water on a community. Their emotion speaks volumes, conveying the urgency and gravity of the situation in a way that numbers and charts cannot.
That raw emotion cuts through the noise. It reaches us on a fundamental level, stirring something deep within. It pierces our hearts and awakens our empathy in a way that statistics never could. It compels us to act, to care, to connect.
This is the power of emotional education. It's about recognizing and embracing our emotions, understanding their role in our lives, and using them to foster deeper connections. It's about recognizing and embracing our emotions, not as weaknesses, but as powerful tools for connection and change. When we understand our emotions, we can better understand ourselves and others, not as weaknesses, but as powerful tools for connection and change. Emotions can drive us to make a difference, to support one another, and to create a more compassionate world.
When we allow ourselves to be moved, to feel deeply and authentically, to genuinely feel the weight of suffering and injustice, we open our hearts to the experiences of others. We open ourselves to a deeper level of understanding. This understanding can lead to meaningful action, to change that is driven by compassion and empathy. Embracing our emotions is not just about personal growth. It's about creating a world where we all feel seen, heard, and understood. Facts and figures are important. They provide context and evidence, but they often fail to ignite the fire within us, the fire that fuels compassion and action. Think about a child suffering from hunger. We can cite statistics about malnutrition, but it's the image of their gaunt face, their pleading eyes that truly breaks our hearts. Emotional experiences have a unique ability to bridge the gap between us and them. They shatter the illusion of separation and remind us of our shared humanity. When we witness genuine emotion, whether it's joy, sorrow, or anger, we see ourselves reflected back. We recognize the universality of the human experience. The world is full of suffering. Water contamination poisons communities. Social injustice marginalizes entire populations. Human rights abuses strip individuals of their dignity.
These issues, often complex and overwhelming, can feel too big to tackle. We become desensitized, numb to the sheer scale of the problems.
This is where emotional education becomes essential. It allows us to connect with these issues on a visceral level.
We need to hear the stories of those impacted, see the fear in their eyes, hear the tremor in their voices. We need to feel the weight of their struggle as if it were our own.
Emotional power is a double-edged sword. While it can be a catalyst for positive change, it can also be misused and manipulated. It's easy to get swept up in the tide of emotion, to react impulsively without thinking critically. The key is to find the balance between emotional engagement and responsible action. We must allow ourselves to be moved, but not ruled by, our emotions. This means asking ourselves tough questions. Are we allowing our emotions to cloud our judgment? Are we using emotional appeals to manipulate or exploit others? History is replete with examples of leaders who harnessed the power of emotion to mobilize people. Martin Luther King Jr., with his soaring rhetoric and unwavering conviction, awakened the conscience of a nation. Malala Yousafzai, with her quiet courage and unwavering belief in education, inspired millions to fight for girls' rights. These individuals understood that true change required more than just intellectual assent. It demanded an emotional awakening. They weren't afraid to be vulnerable, to share their own stories of struggle and hope. Their authenticity resonated with people from all walks of life, creating a shared sense of purpose and inspiring them to demand a better world. Section 6. The Ripple Effect. One heart awakening another. This section delves into the profound impact that one person's emotional awakening can have on another. It's a beautiful chain reaction, a ripple effect that starts with a single heart and spreads to many. Emotional education is not about manipulating emotions, but about cultivating empathy. It's about understanding the depth of human experience and recognizing the shared humanity in each of us. When we learn to empathize, we learn to connect on a deeper level. It's about creating a space where vulnerability is not seen as weakness, but as the birthplace of courage and connection. In these spaces, people feel safe to express their true selves, to share their fears and hopes without judgment. When we allow ourselves to be emotionally present, to truly see and hear the experiences of others, we open ourselves to transformation. This presence fosters a sense of belonging and acceptance, which is essential for personal growth and healing. We become more compassionate, more understanding, more willing to fight for a more just and equitable world. Compassion drives us to take action, to stand up for those who are marginalized, and to work towards a society where everyone is valued. And this transformation doesn't stop with us. It extends to our families, our friends, and our communities. Each act of kindness, each moment of empathy creates a ripple that can change the world. It ripples outward, touching the lives of those around us. These ripples can inspire others to act with empathy and compassion, creating a wave of positive change. Imagine a world where emotional intelligence is valued as highly as intellectual intelligence. In such a world, people would prioritize understanding and supporting each other, leading to stronger, more resilient communities. A world where vulnerability is not feared, but embraced. In this world, people would feel free to express their true selves, knowing that they would be met with empathy and understanding. A world where empathy is the driving force for change. This is the vision we strive for, a world where every heart awakened to empathy can awaken another. creating an unending ripple of positive transformation. Section 7. Cultivating courage. Embracing vulnerability for connection. We live in a culture that often equates vulnerability with weakness. We're taught to armor up, to hide our true selves behind masks of perfection and indifference. But what if vulnerability was actually the key to unlocking our deepest reserves of courage and compassion? Vulnerability is not about oversharing or wallowing in weakness. It's about showing up authentically even when it's uncomfortable. It's about having the courage to say, I don't have all the answers, or I'm hurting and I need support. Section 8. From awareness to action. Turning empathy into engagement. Emotional education is not a passive pursuit, it's a call to action. When we allow ourselves to be moved by the suffering of others, we are compelled to do something about it. This action can take many forms. It might involve volunteering our time, donating to organizations working on the front lines, or using our voices to advocate for change. What matters most is that we move beyond awareness and into engagement. We must translate our empathy into tangible action, however small it may seem. Every act of kindness, every word of support, every effort to make a difference, however small, contributes to a more just and compassionate world. Section 9. A world transformed. The promise of emotional education. Imagine a world where emotional education is woven into the fabric of our families, our schools and our communities. A world where emotional intelligence is as fundamental as reading and writing, and where every individual is equipped with the tools to navigate their inner landscapes. A world where children are taught to identify and express their emotions in healthy ways. They learn to understand their feelings, articulate them, and manage them constructively, fostering a generation that is emotionally resilient and self-aware. A world where vulnerability is seen as a strength, not a weakness, where sharing our struggles and fears is encouraged, and where we find strength in our shared human experience. And empathy is the driving force behind our actions. Imagine communities where people actively listen to one another, where understanding and kindness are the norms, and where every act of compassion ripples outward, creating a more connected and caring society. This may seem like a distant utopia, a dream that is far from our current reality, but it's a future worth striving for. By embracing our emotions, by recognizing the importance of emotional education, we can take steps towards this vision. By cultivating empathy and compassion, we can transform our interactions and relationships. We can create environments where people feel safe to express themselves and where emotional well-being is prioritized. We can create a world where every individual feels seen, acknowledged for who they are, and appreciated for their unique contributions, heard, understood, and valued. In such a world, the barriers that divide us can be broken down, and we can build bridges of understanding and mutual respect. This is the promise of emotional education. To build a world where understanding triumphs over indifference, where emotional literacy is a cornerstone of our society. To create a future where empathy and compassion are not just ideals, but everyday practices that guide our actions and decisions. And compassion lights our way forward, illuminating a path to a more harmonious and empathetic world.